I'm Cadence Debuse, and this is Busybody Podcast. Today, I have the joy of talking with Martha of Luv Martha, LUV, who does bespoke custom bathing suits for all shapes and size humans. And they are absolutely gorgeous, and she is a delight to speak with, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. I would love to know how you got started, but tell us what you do.
Yeah. So I make custom swimsuits, which is feels like such a simplified version of what I'm doing. I make everything made to measurements. So it's all super inclusive. That's basically it. And then I started doing it when, probably about 5 years ago, I was working as a nanny and I was living in California and I could absolutely not afford the cost of living out there. And I kind of always, my entire life, at least my entire adult life, I'd done some sort of sewing or maker situation on the side of all my jobs. So this was kind of just one that I fell into because for my nanny job specifically, I was going on a trip with them. They were a very wealthy family in the Bay Area, and they were taking me on a trip, and I was like, shoot, I do not have any swimsuits that are child family, movement appropriate. And it kind of it has always occurred to me that there just are not a lot of options for bigger bodies that contain you and are also cute. I think that's a really hard niche market, and there just weren't, especially back then 7 or 8 years ago, there were not nearly the amount of options that there are now. And so I made something for myself for this trip, and I posted it on my Instagram where I was also selling dresses and bags and other things, and people just started ordering. They just started messaging me and they were like, hey, can we order this? And I was like, yeah. Absolutely.
Good for you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think at the beginning it was I was just running on pure desperation.
Yeah.
They've improved massively since those days. But I just admire my 26-year-old, 25-year-old bravery to just be yes, I'm absolutely qualified to do this and going for it.
100%. Because that was really my first question, is why bathing suits? I mean, I could guess exactly what you're saying. There really isn't a way to get attractive bathing suits for all different bodies, but also it seems challenging and my other assumption would be that there's a reason that there's not bathing suits so readily available, because it must be hard to make them to be more inclusive. Was that a learning curve, or were you already doing kind of lingerie or things that were sort of adjacent?
It was definitely a learning curve, but I think being in a larger body myself, it was just a lot easier for me. I've been adjusting patterns since I was a little kid to fit my body and my needs. And so I think I'm really used to doing custom work anyway, and involving all that math anyway. Because I used to buy the dresses I was making from vintage patterns from the 50s or 60s, which just were not, at least in good condition. I couldn't find any patterns in my size. So I was just constantly doing that kind of work and that kind of math in my head. So I think I was kind of ready for it, but yeah, at the same time, I wasn't as good at it. I think a lot of patterns they just need to go out into the world and be put on different bodies. And then I get the feedback back and about those patterns that I designed and what they need, and to fit different shapes and things. So I think everything I've ever done always has a learning curve.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And as a small business owner, that's so much of our life is just trying to figure out the next hurdle or the next challenge and learn that and integrate that.
Definitely. I've had a lot of friends though that are happy to assist and get swimsuits. And I have a lot of friends with a lot of different bodies. Obviously, but also just, a variety of sized friends and genders of friends. And I think that's been really helpful in like pattern testing everything, because I can just give people things for their birthday and then be like, how did that work? And have them over and adjust it. And yeah, that's been really helpful.
Do you sell anything that's kind of off the rack, or if someone purchases from you, they always are sending all their measurements?
I just started this year doing regular ready to ship stuff. For years, I've been very committed to only custom work for a lot of reasons. But I think this year it occurred to me that there are a lot of people who buy from me that fit into standard sizing, and it's a lot faster to do ready to ship things. And so I've been trying to do batches of ready to ship for the folks that works for, because then my books are open the rest of the month for the people that doesn't work for, instead of being filled up with like a standard size small person, or like, yeah, it's just made, I don't know why it didn't occur to me before. But yeah, I think it's hard with custom, with the swimsuit industry in general. People have been excluded, and they've been excluded for a reason. And I think being in the custom work, I just didn't want to make people feel that feeling of exclusion in any way. And so I think I was afraid for a long time of offering or even making a size chart, because I just didn't want to put any parameters on anything. But now I see the benefits of doing both. So
that's so interesting. That in itself is such an interesting evolution. I've been reading all these books, and I interviewed recently a stylist, and I've been reading all these books about kind of the history of fitness in the US. And a big part of that, well, particularly for women, is about the creation of like Lycra and, you know, outfits that literally allow women to move their bodies without restriction, and the advent of sports bras, which is really very recent. And then also having sports bras designed by women, so they weren't just getting mashed down, but were actually like separated and comfortable for different size breasts, particularly larger breasts. So that's so interesting, because I know, and I feel like this should just be like, there should just be like constant, you know, messaging out there reminding us all that it's so recent that standardized sizing is even existed, and that it just used to be, you always had your clothes custom fitted. You always were getting measured. And, you know, I just was watching Downton Abbey again recently. Such a fun show. And they're wearing like the most beautiful clothing. And I'm like, God, like you literally would just go and get measured and then you're like, you know, you would have skills to alter things over the years. And no one was going around being like, I'm a size of this, I'm a size of that. That just didn't exist. You know, you would be like, oh, this needs to get taken in. Oh, this is bothering me in the armpit now, like whatever. And so it's just like, I think about that constantly when I'm buying clothes or anything. Like anytime that I get frustrated with sizing, I just remember like, this is just totally made up. And like I would have really not very long ago would have literally just stood there and picked fabric and had someone measure me.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it's also like they started doing standardized sizing before war, like for soldiers. Like it is sad.
Yeah.
You know, like that is what it's based on. And it's just like, no wonder we feel like sad and smushed into boxes. Like that's literally like, it's for like a terrible tragedy. It's like why that began. So yeah, I think that's a lot of people experience that frustration, and we've lost a lot of like the craft and the art around fashion. I mean, not totally. There is still some acceptance of art, or fashion as art, but not in like our everyday lives in the way that it used to be. And I think it's been like a lot of the fashion as art world has been primarily dominated by men. While the fashion as like function is where like we get like a lot of women, especially women of color, in like terrible working conditions in factories and things. And it's been like, I think we keep those things very separate. And I hope like with more makers and more people supporting small time makers and small businesses, we're kind of like integrating the two and being able to like have that conversation about just how messed up that is. And yeah, no, it doesn't have to be like this.
You've been posting about that, I feel like, more frequently, just that there's no such thing as or I'm gonna say it badly, but just like that all clothing is handmade, and that like even fast fashion clothing is handmade, and to just kind of undo this narrative. I do think that a lot of people think that like there's some sort of t-shirt making machine somewhere, like spitting them out like a Dr. Seuss thing or something. Yeah. But like everything is getting hand sewn.
Yeah, I mean, even when I post things, people will respond just so genuinely confused, that things that there isn't some magical t-shirt machine. I mean, there's, maybe like a few situations where things are like automated, but for the vast majority, people are working on the exact same machines I am working on, the same brand and everything. And it was very intentional that we think about this magical t-shirt machine. I think it's easier for a lot of corporations that we are not thinking about the human beings making those things. And we're not talking about them as human beings. We're talking about them as factories that just like spit out clothes. And it's erasing a lot of the experience of these workers who are mostly women of color. And that's just not acceptable. And I think especially as like a white person living in the United States, making money, making clothes, it's my responsibility to talk about them and like make sure people know that those are people making those clothes. I'm not the only one. It's not some magical thing that I know how to make clothes and I'm doing it. There's a ton of people who know how to do this that are doing it every day. I think
it makes me think too, because not only is it erasing their experience, but it also is kind of erasing their skill and really their mastery of a craft. And we don't want to think that like some, TJ Maxx t-shirt is like a highly skilled t-shirt, but then it's like, well, you try and make a t-shirt, try and make a t-shirt with all the seams lining up and the arm sleeves are the same size and the neck is fitting normally and like all this stuff, because it reminds me, my boyfriend used to farm for a long time and like work in the fields, and it's very similar in the food world. People think there's a magical tomato picking machine, and there's plenty of farm equipment, but the food that you are eating, that you're picking up at the grocery store, someone's hands touched all of that, 100% all of that. You cannot pick blueberries or lettuce and all stuff with a machine. Like a person does it, a person packs it all. And he talked about like they would get up at 4 a.m. to harvest all the like delicate things, lettuces and greens, baby greens for the markets, and you literally run from one row to the other, because as soon as they get picked, then the moisture and the sun, all stuff, it's like they're going bad. So they're sprinting, they're cutting them and sprinting down on the lines. And he worked with migrant workers that were there, and then they'd all go to the farmers market, and he said people would ask the craziest questions, like someone asked if birds poop on the vegetables and he was like, where do you think they get grown? They're outside. He was like, birds poop on them, bugs poop on them. I stepped on them. Like, it's just like, wash your damn vegetables, get away from me. Like,
yeah. Oh God, no, that's terrifying. And I think it's like for the exact same reason, it's easier for big industry to make money if people are not thinking about these working conditions of people and how difficult this is, and that those migrant people picking the strawberries are human beings. Like, it's so much easier if we just pretend that these are being grown in like a weird little bubble with no birds and some pulling through very gently, pulling off like water filled tomatoes without breaking them. Like, what are these?
Exactly. Please draw that machine for me. I'm so interested to know what you think that looks like.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. It's mind-boggling, but it's also, not surprising. Like, the people of color in these industries have specifically been left out of the conversation. It's really bad.
And I think just like the way consumerism works, and just sort of like the way modernization, which I'm like putting in quotes, works, we've really devalued all of these hands-on skills throughout the years. It's kind of almost like, I feel like Food Network like elevated cooking and chefs again, but even that was very much like behind the scenes for until we suddenly made that sexy and exciting, and now chefs have like a face. But like, we've taken all of these almost domestic space skills and just put them somewhere behind a curtain, and then we all just buy things off of a rack. When you used to have a relationship with anyone you bought from the baker, you're standing there talking to the baker. You buy clothing, you're talking to the person who made it. Like, you want to know where they're sourcing their stuff from, you literally ask them, and they're like, oh, I'm ordering from here and here and whatever. So far removed from all of that now.
Yeah. And it's like, it is just so like a few old white men somewhere can make more, because like the less people, the less we're thinking about them as people, the less they can get paid, the worse their situations can be. So that some random guy in some office somewhere is making billions of dollars. And it's just, I mean, and it's the same with like how the swimsuit industry and what you were talking about with the fitness world, not including women, not working for women's bodies, and not like, there is industries, huge industries profiting off of us not having the things we need to participate in joyful activities, and us feeling poorly, like feeling bad feelings about ourselves, so that we spend money on something that will make it quote unquote better to some random person. But like, ultimately it is not profitable for us to ever achieve that.
Right.
So they have to keep coming up with something new to make us feel bad about, instead of just, all being people and interacting one-on-one with each other and making things that work for that person, and people making things that they want to make. It's just not set up that way anymore.
Well said. How do you kind of interact with the swimsuit world, or tell me more about like kind of the history of that industry, because I don't have a sense of like sort of that strain of the fashion family tree. I've interacted with some small like fitness brands, which seems sort of like adjacent, mainly because they're making like stretchy clothing. And I'm always amazed when any like independent fitness brand can get anywhere, because I'm just like, what a saturated market. Like, I'm just astounded that this person is like continuing to put stuff out. And actually my favorite brand closed a while ago. But I'm like, the history of like swimsuits and like where you're fitting in with that. Do you have a sense of your own?
I mean, I think it's a funny market, because it's in fashion, because it's one of the only little like corners of fashion that people like dread. They dread shopping for, wearing them, using them, but it's also a really functional piece. And so I think it does overlap a lot with the fitness world, because it is the clothing that you need to wear, or we've been told we need to wear if we're swimming or playing in the water, any of those things. And I think it has a complicated history, similar to kind of like women's bras and those kind of things. It was never designed by women for years and years and years. And so it was really impractical things like I think everybody's classic of like a very impractical swimsuit is the string bikini, right. Which just like works for so few bodies. It's just such a silly piece, and it like doesn't even work for the function side.
Doesn't work for swimming.
Of the activity, which is, it's so funny, and it's so like, I think that one really resembles what the men designing the things and what the industry of itself like thought about itself. Because it was excluding larger bodies. It was excluding bodies that didn't fit, not only from the clothes, but from those activities themselves. And I think like that is a huge part of this whole conversation, is that like we are leaving people out of activities, and like we're doing that also similarly to how we're leaving out whole people making things and growing things. We're leaving out bodies for a reason. And yeah, and I think like what I'm trying to do in doing custom work, or just for making things for larger bodies and making things that, you know, involve a conversation with a person about what they need and what they would feel comfortable in, and what activities they're trying to do in it, is just trying to talk. It's like a whole larger performance art piece about that specifically, about about excluding all these people and what we can do about that, and how to kind of undermine a lot of what's been like we've been programmed to think about where we're allowed and what spaces and what we're supposed to look like in those spaces. Because everybody is allowed in like a joyful activity. Like it's so sad that we've been convinced that we weren't. But I think, being convinced that we weren't is also like a bigger conversation about patriarchy and capitalism and all the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to get everyone to buy their diets and their 6-week six packs, 6-week bikini body things and their all this stuff if you can't make them feel terrible or excluded, essentially?
Exactly. And like at the same time, I feel like at the same time that we're being pressured to be smaller is usually when people, especially women, are making more noise. I think like the majority of the time that like women in the workforce peaked was in the 90s, and that's also when eating disorders peaked. Mm-hmm. It's like not a coincidence, and I think that's happening again with like whatever, like the age of Ozempic.
Mm-hmm. We're like fat liberation / Ozempic moment.
Yeah, like that it's very intentional. And with like Trump stuff and, you know, people walking around punching women in the face in New York City, like these things all coinciding at the same time are not accidental. It's definitely like a response. And so, I guess like my little corner of the market, my little niche is also a response. But it's what I'm trying to make people like feel safe and feel invited and feel included, and feel like cute and comfortable.
I mean, I think that's one of the most powerful things that fashion does. I think that's like, you know, what Queer Eye like articulates very well. Like I think Jonathan Van Ness is like so wonderful, and he's so good at just explaining to people why like spending just 2 seconds on your face in the morning is not vain and it's not a waste of time. And he's like, you taking time for yourself to just say like, how do I feel today? What am I doing? You know, what do I want to express today? And I think that message gets lost a lot with fashion, because fashion is often used to make us feel bad about ourselves, or like you can't fit into these little jeans or whatever. But if you have a space where fashion is more inclusive, or just like the parameters of what the point of it is you know, changed to be more about literally, what do you feel right now? How do you feel? And how do you want to present yourself? That's so powerful. And I think about your work because I don't think of myself as old, but I'm in my early 40s. And I really noticed that all of a sudden, everyone my age like doesn't wear bright bathing suits anymore. And I love bright colors. And I'm like looking around at the beach, and I go to this regular winter cold swim. And I was like, how come only me and like the little 20-year-olds are wearing like bright bathing suits? And I was like, what is this? I turned 40 and I'm supposed to wear a black one piece? Like, no, it's not. I refuse. And like, who made that rule? And why is everyone following it? Like, it's just so surprising. I just look around and everyone suddenly in my age group is wearing just the most, you know, like, don't look at me basically clothing, regardless of what their body type is. But literally just like there's this ageist aspect as well to bathing suits and that public space, that beach space, that like if you're not between 12 and 28, apparently you're like not supposed to have fun anymore or something. And I love that about your bathing suits. Like they're so expressive, they're so fun, there's patterns, there's color, there's cutouts, like they're sexy. And you can choose like how much flesh you want to show and all that stuff. Because I've definitely noticed that just as I've gotten older, like, first of all, I do different things at the beach. I did used to probably wear string bikinis a lot more, and I didn't jump in the water as much. And now I like to jump in the water, and I don't want my boobs falling all over the place. So now I'm trying to find like bathing suits that work for what I want, but aren't like so restrictive and covering me up a lot and blah, 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 like all these things. So I think that like these spaces, these little parts of the culture, I think that is so powerful. I hope I'm doing that with just my fitness teaching, being really open and like kind of outside of that feel terrible about yourself way of operating.
Yeah. It's just so prevalent that like that is just in everything, that feeling, that pressure to feel bad about ourselves or to hide. Like the messaging is for like larger bodies or queer bodies or bodies over like 30 years old is like, don't go outside. Like what is messaging here? It's just,
everybody's seen like the ruffle bathing suit and been like, oh God, don't let that ever be me. Like the ruffle bathing suit.
Yeah. Well, and it's just this pressure that's in all parts of our lives, and especially for women to like be young and be desirable, and to who though? Like, cause that's just such it's like that, Naomi Wolf quote about, oh man, I'm not going to get it right. But like the obsession with female beauty isn't about female beauty or something. Or no, the obsession with female thinness is not about female beauty. It's about like female submissiveness.
Yeah.
I didn't get that right at all, but it's something along those lines that like it is a sedative to keep us like in this little box of being young, being small, being like impressionable, being like a malleable little like bird or something. It's just like we don't get to be people in that world. We don't get to age. We don't get to exist. And we also don't get to, I've noticed with a lot of my friends who are having kids, that like they don't feel like they're allowed to wear the swimsuits that they wore before. And like I want people to feel comfortable, like choose whatever you feel comfortable in, but it is this interesting conversation about like how we treat people who have had babies. And like how they're now supposed to be like a different person moving through the world, which like obviously it changes us in a lot of ways, but but
you can't be sexy anymore and like all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
and you're just like, what, like hide under like a moo because like you made a baby? Like that doesn't make any sense. It's so silly.
Do you do maternity wear often, or like maternity bathing suits?
I do. Yeah, I do a lot of, I have like, especially with the lace up options that I offer, I think it works really well for pregnant bodies and like postpartum, and also just for like people who fluctuate regularly. Sorry, my puppy just brought me like a little toy.
I've got 2 dogs that I'm like, can everyone hear them snoring? They're like,
it's
all rainy and dreary here. Everybody's snoring very loudly.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. I like doing that. And then there's also, I get to talk to people, about what's more comfortable for them for breastfeeding and that kind of thing. It's like one of the fun parts about doing custom work is like you get to meet people where they are exactly in their life right then. And it might not be where they were the last time I made a swimsuit for them or the next time I make a swimsuit for them. It's fun.
Yeah, you must have a lot of repeat customers. Do you find like do you develop long-term relationships with people?
Yeah, I do. I was actually, my website now, my new website keeps track of that. And I was like laughing the other day about like, I have very few in general new customers.
Yeah.
Like primarily customers that have been around for a while. And some of them, I've seen them. The ones that I don't, that I only know through ordering that aren't my friends from before. I've seen them through kids and through one person I was messaging with recently had a double mastectomy, and we're designing this new swimsuit because the ones before don't work. And it's just a amazingly intimate part of like being a part of somebody's life without really like knowing them. But I just feel honored to like be part of some people's life events and like get invited in like that.
You're also, I'm realizing you're really making space for people to speak for their needs. Like that must be that intimacy. Someone's really saying, I need this to be like this, or I feel like this in my body when this happens, or, you know, if it digs in here, blah, blah, blah. And so that's like such a specific, very personal connection. It's not like a doctor, but I'm almost like, oh, it's almost like sitting on the table and just really like telling someone something you might not tell everybody else, that, you know, that you about your body. Like, I want this to feel different. I need this to change, or like whatever. And you're really giving them this space, and then like sending them this gift, like this wonderful thing that is so beautiful to do, as you say, like joyful activities. It's such a, like, what a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it's really special. I do feel sometimes, like I'm like a secret keeper for a lot of people. Like my emails are just like, full of what people need and what people feel like weird about, or what people are uncomfortable with. And it's just like a really vulnerable thing to share with somebody you don't know over Instagram. And I feel really lucky that people like trust me with that information, and know that like I'm coming from a place where like I don't judge anybody for anything. And numbers on the measurements too. I know people struggle to take their own measurements and things like that. Like sometimes that can be a difficult conversation, or like seeing that, and we get to have conversations about that, or having their friend do it and them email me separately. And but like the numbers to me on my end are just numbers. Like they're in the same, like, whatever, like 20 inches. Funny. That it just doesn't, they are just numbers on the screen for me. They don't hold any of like the power that society has said they hold. And I think there's something like really, for other people and for me, like really freeing about that feeling. This whole process of making swimsuits, inclusive swimwear for other people, has also like invited me into like exploring my relationship with my own body, and with all of ours, that I just like I don't think about it like I did before.
It reminds me, when I was interviewing the stylist that I had on a couple weeks ago, we talked about like what kind of really is the definition of flattering, you know, and really trying to redefine that, because typically it's essentially, do I look fat in this? Like that's typically what people mean when they say, does this look good? Do I look good in this? Does this look good? And that kind of classic dressing room conversation and looking in the mirror, it's only looking for like, you know, quote unquote flaws. It's only looking for things that you don't want to see. And I think like this, you know, in so many ways, as you've said, like very kind of political way of addressing fashion is really to look at all the positives and be like, what parts of your body do you want to highlight? Where do you know, what do you think is beautiful about yourself or sexy, or like, how do you want to feel in this? And then let's go from there, and just like, this is what comes out of it, as opposed to like hiding lumps and bumps or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, I definitely have people that send me pictures of themselves and ask what I think would be most flattering. And my response is always like exactly along those lines. Like, I don't think flattering exists. It's something that like we have made up. It's generally about like, making ourselves look or appear smaller, or like curvy in the quote unquote right ways. And that's just so personal. Like, I have no idea what somebody else thinks is flattering on them. Like, I cannot hop into your brain. And so like, normally I recommend that people put on like undies or something that's a similar shape, or even a swimsuit, you know, something that like feels similar, and stand in front of a mirror if they're comfortable with that, and like decide what it is that they like about that cut or that look, or like what is making them feel good and confident and cute in it. Because it is so personal. And I think like the only thing that is actually flattering is somebody like feeling good and looks good. Because if you feel comfortable and you feel like you look good, you're going to. Like, I'll believe it for sure. Yeah, so it's like the same thing with like the conversations about like trying to pull off clothes. Like that also doesn't exist. Anybody can pull off anything. Like you just put it on, and if you feel good and you like it, you look great.
Yeah, I know. I have this conversation with so many people of just like, who is this outside person that we're all afraid of, this like judgment from the outside? And I fully understand that some people literally got bullied in the past or live in environments where they're getting bullied now, or they live, they live in cities or towns where there's just like a more conservative vibe and people really stare at you if you have like colored hair or like a more, I lived in Southern Illinois for like a brief moment in college, and I did really experience that of just like being at the grocery store with like, just a more expressive outfit and people really staring, like they just really hadn't seen somebody just kind of dress in a more expressive way. So I totally get that. And also at the end of the day, like being judged by a stranger on the street that you just keep walking past, like it just doesn't hold the weight that we seem to all give it when we're at home alone, putting our outfits on or putting our bathing suits on or choosing what to buy. And we really have this idea of like, I must look good in this, like, well, and it's like, for who? Literally, like, are you walking down a catwalk and people are taking pictures? Like,
yeah.
And I try and remind that, to myself all the time. And now that I've been having these conversations, I also keep interrogating for myself, like, what do I call flattering, or what do I mean when I think something doesn't look good on me, or I put something on and I decide like, oh, I don't want to wear this right now. Like, why? What stopped me? Like, what is it? So I think it's just so, yeah, I'm just imagining the kinds of conversations you must have with people. It must just be such an exchange also for you to really just like pull all this apart for yourself, not just for your clients.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've really had to, I think going in, to this business, I was young. I was like 25 and, already very much like having conversations about body positivity. I actually, when I was in high school and middle school, I was anorexic and was hospitalized a number of times and have done like a ton of therapy and have been recovering since I was about 16. But I mean, I think I've been a part of that conversation for a very long time and thought I was really healed, quote unquote, when I was 25, when I started this, and thought I was really comfortable in my skin because like comparatively I was, and compared to a lot of people around me, I was. And I don't know. I think this has highlighted how much I still had to learn, and like how, because I just feel inauthentic having those conversations with people and not being able to live that myself. And that's okay. Like, it's okay that it's taken me a while. I'm not, I don't feel bad about it necessarily, but it just helped push me to really live that in all elements of my life. Because it was just the programming, like diet culture programming, was so pervasive. Like grew up and was a little girl in the 90s. Like it was just everywhere. And I think that's also maybe why we have a little bit of this like mystery person always looming that's going to shame us. When we were little kids, we'd walk into the grocery store with like just the racks and racks of magazines about, of like people getting photographed unknowingly at the beach with like a belly or something. Like there was this like weird boogeyman feeling around specifically like fatness when I was little. And I think it's like, it's hard to get that out of your head. It's hard to feel like safe, like that's not happening. And that, and then it does, especially on the internet. Like I definitely have a bunch of trolls that say all kinds of wild stuff to me sometimes.
Yeah, I was about to say, because you model the bathing suits yourself, which is like, I mean, I want to address so many things that you just said. So let me work backwards. I totally agree. I totally agree on so many levels. and also for myself and like my own healing. And, you know, here I am like leading a fitness studio and putting out this like body positive message. And then when Trump got elected, I really fell into this like spiral for a couple of months because there was so much misogyny, and there still is now ever since that time. Really, it's like misogyny has just become mainstream, that you can just say horrible things about women and it's just like just out and proud. And I really had to just suddenly examine, like I couldn't work out all of a sudden because I suddenly was aware that there was still this part of me that was like this like 10 to 15%. It felt so small, but it was like this thorn in me all of a sudden, that there was still this part of me that was working out to quote unquote not be fat, or to literally work out for like male gaze. And I just was like, I couldn't do anything until it felt like that really like fully like seeped out of my body. And I just was like, I just spent time just like stretching and like doing some gentle Pilates and just trying to like let this process, and really just all this pain. And I feel like when I moved back into like doing my own fitness routine, just that in itself was super empowering, like reintegrating and like reconnecting and becoming a lot more interested in skills and things like that. But I hear that where you think that you've like healed all these things, and then you just realize like it's such a long journey, and this messaging is so deep. It's just so pervasive and deep. And especially if you're just like a white woman, like cisgender, all stuff, like you have all this privilege that I think really gives you a bubble that you don't even realize how manipulated you are, because you've never had to make choices around how you present yourself in the same way as someone who's already on the outside. I have so many queer friends and people that like have really interrogated this stuff since they were children, and really decided like, you know, almost every facet of how they interact with their attractiveness, with their perception of beauty, with their gender, with how they present for other genders and being out in the world. And I'm just like, damn, I've just been wearing skinny jeans because that's what I thought everyone does. Like, it didn't occur to me to wear different cuts. You know, it's just like, I just like bought the things because that's what's in front of me. And like, and I do have a straight size body. So like, I'm just wearing the stuff at the store. Like, I didn't have to think about those things for so long. And it's been, you know, just I feel like the older I get, the more I pull that apart, and the more there are like really visible people to see them modeling like a different way of being, that makes me start to think like, oh, well, how would I dress if I literally didn't think about men ever? Like, what would that be like, you know? And like, you know, all of these things. So I think that's so I totally hear that in your story. Now I forgot, what was the last thing you said that I wanted to comment on?
Yeah, I don't know. I was listening to you.
That you model your own stuff, which is like, so, I mean, I'm on my own Instagram, but my world is more funny, where I teach and I record everything. And so I see myself recorded like all the time. And I had to go through this like whole weird thing. I would be like, oh my God, you can literally trace my period. You can like see me get bloated and then go back down. Like, you do a time lapse of me over like 28 days. Like, you know, I'm looking at myself like, oh, my pandemic body, my post-pandemic body. Like, I can like still, so I don't think anyone else sees it, but like, it's so weird looking at yourself. And fortunately, I've had some celebrity clients who were able to like, they're like, oh yeah, like, let me tell you about seeing yourself in all the different angles and all these things. But yeah, you're putting yourself out there as like a large body, like literally in bathing suits, like what so many people, it would be their nightmare. I mean, you're very beautiful, but like that must be really intense.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. But also, yeah, it's absolutely intense. And I think it's kind of, it has been difficult. And I think sometimes the trolls and like the people that say mean things to me, over time, it's gotten a lot easier, and it's kind of easy just to like laugh it off and block them. Be like how interesting to like exist in a body. I think I've realized like a lot of the power that I hold existing in a larger body, that there is something inherently subversive about this body. and the way just like my biology works, that's like really cool because it's always been really important. I mean, it's important to me to try to break down systems, oppressive systems. And I think it's pretty awesome that I was just like born into a body that has like insulin resistance and things that like, it just wasn't ever going to be small. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
and
right on.
I've figured out how to see that more, and now seeing people angry or upset at me for showing it kind of just reinforces that feeling, which is fun. But yeah, it's an interesting process, and I think it had a lot to do. Like I saw a lot of my own growth in photographing myself in a swimsuit for a gazillion years, you know, and my body has fluctuated. I fluctuate pretty like wildly, regularly because of my hormone stuff. And it's just cool to look back at like a couple of years ago and see a totally different version of me and not have any feelings of like shame or I don't know, things that I would have felt when I was younger about it. It's interesting. And I think it's also difficult though, because I think, I mean, like you said before about what would I do if I didn't dress for men or like for the male gaze. And I think it's a really interesting process making swimsuits and being in like a curvy body and not doing it for men. And that it's just a funny conversation. It's like a slippery little line of showing the swimwear and showing what you can do in it, and I'm totally comfortable with my own hotness, but also not doing that like for somebody's approval. It's just such a funny little thing. Like it's
what a line
things to live side by side. And I think that's when I get a lot of the trolls that are just really upset that I feel hot and look at, and that I'm in a body that they're convinced isn't. And like, they're confused about that. I don't know. That makes sense.
100%. To like, that is the magic line, right? Like to feel sexy and be beautiful and not have that be for men. And what does that look like? And your photos are like just so joyful and beautiful and like full feeling, like all this stuff. And you're not posing in the typical bathing suit ways, you know, you're not like draping backwards off of something or like all these things. And I'm always aware of like that messaging is so strange, like in women's clothing, and like there's not really like a catalog world anymore. Maybe there is more for other suburbs or something, but you know, I don't shop out of catalogs anymore, but I used to when I was a teenager, and it was like sexualized photos. Like, remember like Delia's and stuff like that? It's like sexualized photos of like 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
I was like, why is that what I'm supposed to like? It's so weird. It's like car commercials or something. It's like women are the ones who buy most cars, and most car commercials are like the rugged man like taking the car off-road, and it's just like, make an advertisement for me. I'm the one buying it.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just shows like who's making these commercials, because they just like clearly have no idea. It's like the same thing with like, I don't know, people like laughing, eating like Yoplait yogurt or whatever. Yeah. It's like, it's not funny. Yeah. Yogurt is not funny. Having a pretty woman eating yogurt and laughing doesn't work on me. And like for the vast majority of people, a lot of like people in straight relationships, a lot of women are doing the shopping still. And I think it's funny that like that's being directed supposedly at them.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That doesn't work for them. They're not convinced that yogurt's fun. They might want to eat yogurt anyway, but like not because it's funny.
When you first, like, were you always just modeling your stuff? Like, did it kind of occur to you that you were making such a statement? Was it just out of ease? or did you start out putting it on other people and then realize, oh, it's just like easier if I do it or something like that?
I think it's both. I started modeling it myself because I was the person there. The first photo shoot I ever did actually was me and my sister taking turns photographing. My sister is in a straight size body. We're very different physically. And so I was like, this is a good range of seeing how the suits fit. But we were just passing the camera back and forth and taking photos of each other. And then, yeah, I guess that's always been part of the conversation for me. And I'm not sure if that's because I've always been very open about having an eating disorder. All of my friends growing up always knew, because I had to have really strong boundaries about how people were allowed to talk about their own bodies around me. And I just think it's important. It's been important for my healing to have people talk openly about things they've struggled with. Yeah, and just like be able to talk about it and be real about it and not be shameful and secretive. I don't think we're going to get over things the quieter we are about them, and like move on collectively if we don't all know this is happening and that we've all felt, a certain amount of pressures to some extent and everybody's handling them differently, but a lot of us are handling them similarly. And so I think, yeah, when I started taking photos and posting them of me in my swimsuits, it couldn't not be about that kind of at first, because it was a shift for me from what I'd been posting before. And there was some growing pains around that. And I think the earlier photographs were a little more like I was hiding a little more than I do now. But yeah, then I also try to get a bunch of my friends to model whenever I can, but they're just not living in my house. So it's a lot easier for me to do it, mostly, but periodically I'll like get a friend and make a bunch of swimsuits for them and then do a whole day. I have one of those coming up that I'm excited about.
And you take the photos?
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yeah. It's fun. I feel like I just posted something the other day about like how nobody is just one thing. Yeah. And I am not only a seamstress, like I've been interested and been doing tons of different mediums of art since I was young. Yeah, like I feel like there's ceramics and paintings and all kinds of things behind me that I did. And I like photography also. I'm not that good at it, but it's really fun and interesting, and it like sparks the creativity that I don't always get from swimsuits anymore. Just make many of them.
But yeah, my last couple of questions are really practical. Like, where do you get your ideas? Like, do you look at, now I used to be super into fashion when I was a teenager and like read, like look at a lot of fashion photography. Is there like a swimsuit, I don't know, like runway, or like, is there a moment where like, are there other things to look at out there that do you ever draw inspiration from?
Yeah, I think a lot of things. Well, first off, there is like big swim events. There's like Miami Swim Week, I think it's called. I've never watched it though, but I bet it's pretty cool. But I think I get a lot of my inspiration from like vintage swimwear. I like to look at, I really like photos of like Italy in the 60s. I feel like there are really cool swimsuits happening and like really creative ones. And in Europe, like Italy and Spain and stuff, I feel like the styles weren't as like homogenized as they were here. So I've been looking at a lot of that recently, but I think in general, lingerie stuff, I like to check out and see what people are doing. I think there's really cool stuff happening in that industry too. And I think we have a lot of crossover, and I can get inspiration looking at what people are doing there. But yeah, mostly I just make things that I like and I want to wear, and I just get lucky that other people tend to like them. But sometimes they don't.
Did you ever get requests from people who are like, can you do a custom bathing suit, but like not your style? Like,
oh yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's funny. I get a number of people that want me to recreate a swimsuit that they love, which I totally understand that, but I don't. If it's a modern swimsuit, I won't do it because that's just, like ripping somebody off, somebody's design. If it's a vintage swimsuit, I will like do a play on it because I think the equipment and like how we were making swimsuits back then is different than how I'm doing it anyway. So there like has to be a change, but yeah, people definitely ask me to do things that are none of my designs, and I have so many designs, so it's always very funny.
That is really fun. People are hilarious.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to make a swimsuit?
Not that long. I tend to make, like, if it's a work day where I don't have any administrative work or anything else, I usually, if I'm working all day, like a classic 9 to 5 kind of hour, I can make like 4 swimsuits.
Wow.
Yeah. But I rarely actually do that kind of a day. Sure. I have so much other stuff with the business that I have to handle. But yeah. So I guess, what is that, like 2 hours?
That's so cool. What would you say for someone, I mean, you got my mind working on like, what would I ask you to make? Like, what do most people just come to you and say like, I really like that one that you already made, and then they give you their measurements? Or do people like really just want like a completely like kind of new design, or like their own design that they're sending to you, and is this possible, that kind of thing?
I definitely get both. Some people, I feel like some people don't like imagine fabrics and designs together very well. So I think a lot of people have to wait for their brains to see something that they like. And then they're like, I want exactly that because I know I like it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But I think I have a lot of people who know what styles they would like on themselves, but want help with fabric. I definitely have opinions about fabric because I am with the fabric all day long. And as much as, I try to get the photographs online color true, it depends on people's like computer settings and what's happening, how they actually show up on the screen. So I think it's difficult for people to pair, and it's just a bunch of boxes. So like pairing together the fabrics that will look great together, or like are really fun together. But sometimes people know exactly what they want, and they have like an idea of things together that I wouldn't have thought of. And it's surprising and amazing. But yeah, the way my website works usually is just people select a style, and then an order form pops up where they type, write in the fabric that they want, and then they can select the coverages that they want, and then they put in all their measurements. So that process is usually all automated. If they want something that I don't offer, then they generally email me first to talk about it, to talk about the idea, and I'll let them know like what I can and can't do, or like what I'm willing to do.
That's so cool. And I'm sure that that's been like a huge growth of just like making your website easier and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. It was definitely very confusing for a while. I think doing custom and like getting the input needed for something fully custom like that, that conversation around what people are comfy in, is just hard to do when I'm not a like web designer, But we have great stuff out there now. That allows you to make some pretty good websites without really knowing what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And is that the best way people should find you, from your Instagram and your website? You don't have like a different store location or something?
No, I don't have any in-person stores. I live in south of Austin, Texas, in San Marcos, and I do pop-ups locally in Austin, and hopefully this year in San Antonio, but I don't have like a brick and mortar store. So just the website is Luv Martha.
Would you ever be interested in like, I just feel like so many small boutiques would like hold your stuff.
Yeah, I I go back and forth about it. I think it's kind of been like my similar hang up about doing ready to ship stuff. I think encountering my work in the wild like that, I think those people may not realize that I do custom, even if it's like, you know, like a little note or something near the swimsuits, and feel like I just don't want anyone ever with any of my work to ever feel left out and like something doesn't work for them. And so I feel like it's tricky. Like me doing pop-ups personally works because I'm right there and I can take measurements and talk to them about like, they can try stuff on, but then also have a conversation about why that didn't work for them and what they would feel more comfortable in if it didn't work. And yeah, I think it's trickier with boutiques, but my dream would be to have like a brick and mortar that is also my studio, that is also like a community, like meeting space, or a studio for other artists, and like have communal machines and teach sewing classes. And I don't know where all this made up time that I have is going to come from.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, but it sounds very fun. And that is what I would love. That's probably as far as I would, if I were to do brick and mortar, I would do it kind of like that.
That sounds amazing. Also, as someone who had 2 brick and mortars and now does virtual, so much less of a headache virtual. So but that sounds great if you like meet people who can all facilitate something like that.
Yeah, totally. It would have to be like a group decision to like keep it open, because like
you'll never have time to make a bathing suit. You'll immediately someone else will be making them, and then you'll be like, "What have I done?"
Exactly. I would hate
that. That's so cool, and already my like brain is working. I'm like, you could just make a really cool label in the bathing suits that says that you also do custom work, like something, so that if someone picks something up and is like, oh, this will never fit me, like that label would pop out or something. I don't know.
That's so true. Yeah, I could definitely have like them tagged to explain that. Some
kind of neat packaging thing. Just, I'm literally thinking, I have a friend who has a vintage store, and I just feel like like her kind of shop could have just like 5 of your bathing suits that are just kind of like off the rack, that are very vintage inspired. And then if there was appropriate packaging around them or something, anyone else could then be put in touch with you for custom.
Yeah, that's so true. I know. Maybe now that I've like dipped into doing like art pre-made stuff, I'll like sit with that more. Yeah. I never really gave it much thought when I also wasn't doing ready to ship.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, because that's like, that would be the next kind of disruptive thing, would be to have that kind of ready to wear that isn't exclusive, which like is basically impossible, but how do you make it not impossible? Like that would be amazing.
Yeah, that's so true. And I do have like a lot of really adjustable designs. Like if I kept the stuff in store, like with lace up sides on the bottoms or whatever, like it could fit a lot of bodies. Ooh.
Now we're back to the Dr. Seuss thing. It'd be like the Dr. Seuss bathing suit that like fits everybody.
Exactly.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for meeting up, and I hope someday, well, first of all, to order a bathing suit from you for sure, but secondly, I would love, it would be so cool to see you at some point. That I'm just like, you have such a nice energy. It's so fun to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would love that. This has been super fun.
Well, I'll put all your stuff in the show notes, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything that you keep doing. It's really amazing.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm excited for this summer. I have like some dreams of ready to ship stuff that's going to be cool. I have some really cool, one of my like big things with the business was to have artists design the fabric for me, like artists that I really like. And so this year I have a couple coming, that are going to be amazing. I'm so excited. They're like, I actually can't believe I'm like low-key fangirling about it, because I can't believe they messaged me back. Like I just kind of cold messaged, because I have had my friends that are artists design fabric for me in the past. But I know those humans outside of Instagram, and these ones, like, I don't even They don't even know me on Instagram, and I was just messaging a bunch of artists I like on Instagram, and a couple got back, and they are excited, and I can't believe it. It's gonna be so
cool.
Yeah,
that's so cool. Well, I'm super excited to see that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.